It's been a whole week since the Met Gala. Can you believe I'm very late to the party? So I know it becomes the Influencer Olympics and everyone wants to be first to say something, but there was a lot to digest. There was a lot to pay attention to. There was a lot to break down, a lot of analysis I wanted to do. I did a lot of research. So this is a very research-oriented video on the Met Gala. So if you're here for face value, which is fine, she's pretty, she's not. I would have liked to see this longer. Not this video. We're talking history, we're talking motifs, we're talking analysis, what's important, what's not. So if you're here for who wore it best, this is not your video. And before I get into today's topic, let me break down a few things for you really quickly. So the first thing I want to say is that fashion is very subjective, right? So fashion is art. It's in the eye of the beholder. You can't just sit here and say something is objectively good or bad when it comes to art. And to me, it's more simple. It's more, are you saying something or are you not? So are they just there to be there, or are they saying something, they're making a statement if they are participating in a way that's meaningful? I'm here to talk about some inspiration, some attitude, some intention, some innovation, and I want to talk about the story behind garments, what they're telling, what they're feeling, and the world that it builds for both the garment as it is and for the wearer. Right before I get into it, for example of what I'm talking about, Lana Del Rey. Was she on theme? I find it hard to believe, but she had a great time. You can tell by her attitude she was heavy-handed in what she wanted to wear. She brought her garment to life. She brought a garment for, as far as being at the Met Gala goes, it being a 2 for the Met Gala, and she brought it up to like a 10 in her own way because she was so happy to be there. She had a great attitude. She was getting a story behind it. Was it on theme? No. Was it inspired? A little. But she was so happy to be in there and she gave her garment life. And that matters. That's what I care about, but more so on theme. And before I do that, I will not be talking about Chanel or jewelry. So primarily, Chanel was a Yahtzee agent. Now, listen, hear me out. There's a time and a place for everything. There's hundreds of red carpets every year that celebrities do. And I think that for a Met Gala where the theme is what black men did post-slavery, I don't feel that, first of all, wearing the name of a known Yahtzee is at all appropriate. Dua Lipa, Jenny, you're not in my videos and I bid you farewell. As far as jewelry goes, De Beers and Cartier, I saw a lot of influencers, a lot of my peers, talking about how inspired the jewelry pieces were and how incredible they were. And I'm like, Africa was pillaged over these materials. Slavery is rooted in extracting these natural resources and materials from Africa. The entire continent of Europe destroyed Africa over natural resources and minerals. You know, it's one thing for a black person to be wearing, you know, Cartier diamonds and being like, taking that power back in a way. There was a lot of white people just gallivanting around in 20 karat diamonds, standing out to me being Isha Ambani, even though she looked decent. I'm not gonna speak about her much just because her look was more about the diamonds. And again, there's a really good chance those are blood diamonds. And I just felt that it was tone deaf. You know, if you had companies, especially like De Beers, saying, hey, we're sitting this one out, we want to do something else for the African community, we want to only dress black creators for this Met Gala, just something that acknowledges, hey, we did something wrong, but we're gonna do something better instead. I think that would have been setting the tone. Of course, these companies are not going anywhere. Keep the money is what I say, but at least give some of the power symbolically back. So because of how tone deaf it was for the theme, we are not talking Chanel, we're not talking jewelry, I'm not even acknowledging. We'll talk about Diljit though. And yes, I'm late, and yes, this is going to be a 2-part video, so bear with me. We have so much to discuss. I also want to state that the theme and the dress code are 2 different things, right? So let's talk about the theme of the night. The theme of the night being the actual theme of the Met Gala, super fine, tailoring black style. So we're talking about the significance of black dandyism. We're talking about Monica L. Miller's book, Slaves to Fashion, black dandyism and the styling of black dysphoric identity, and some other discussions that Vogue has had on black men's fashion from the 18th century to the present, tailored to you. So of course, you're free to incorporate the theme, you're free to follow the dress code, or just wear black tie. And I think that's where a lot of the disconnect happened, where people aren't getting it. The theme doesn't mean show up in a zoot suit. The theme doesn't mean show up wearing just a blazer and some pants. That's not the point. The point is it's tailored to you. Of course, feel free, incorporate the theme and what's happening with the gala that you're viewing, and also follow the dress code tailored to you. It has to speak to you, to your personality, to your body, to your consciousness, to your choices, to what you want to wear, what statement you want to make. Which again, there's so much room for interpretation based on just black tie, just the gala exhibit and the theme, and just the dress code. So first, let's talk about Kylie really quickly. I know, let's just get it out the way because she didn't do that awful. She wore a tailored gown. Up top, it was tailored. The sheer panel, okay, it's very on brand for Kylie. It makes sense. And she did wear suiting fabric. She did wear like a wool tweed. It looked a little bit blendish. It looked a little heavy in a way. As we know, Maximilian and Ferragamo dressed her, which is why I wanted to give it more of a shot. I was really trying to understand it for the week. And I see it's very on brand for Kylie. It was very busty out there. The girls are out having a good time. She's very proud of her body. She spent a lot of money on it. Kudos to her. So in that sense, suiting fabric, it was tailored up top. It was made by Maximilian. I'll give it some props for that. And of course, I want to talk about Olivier. Olivier Roussing, of course, the designer of Balmain. And he walked onto the red carpet with a sewing machine. He had a Balmain sewing machine. And it was a statement. It was a celebration of craftsmanship, which is what this entire Met Gala was about. And I think it was a really nice homage to the people behind the scenes that you don't necessarily see on the red carpets or even pay attention to on the red carpets, because sometimes they are there, like the Miuccia Pradas and Donatellas of the world. So in a world where we can see fashion being detached from its roots, I felt that Olivier brought it back to basics, reminding us of the process and the beauty of that, and the celebration of craftsmanship and what's underpinning the entire industry. It was a really fun and innovative reminder that behind every garment you see, there's teams, there's people, there's decades of experience, there's hours and hours of tedious, backbreaking work in some cases. I really love that little piece honoring fashion designers and behind the scenes. Now let's get into some heavier stuff, right? We had Burna Boy, and this is what I was talking about. It's not just about looking pretty, it's about saying something, right? So for Burna Boy, it was very deep in the symbolism, right? So he's wearing a very deep royal red tuxedo by Oswald Boateng, paired with oxblood eelskin cape, which is really cool. It was eelskin. So Oswald isn't just any old designer. He was the first black designer on Savile Row, literal pioneer of black tailoring craftsmanship in Europe. So the fact that Burna Boy made a very distinct and conscious choice already screams he knew what he was doing. And the cape, it spoke to me a lot, especially the material being eelskin. We see people, especially with colonialism, when they were pillaging, especially coastal areas, for materials, for livestock, and using, in some cases, in some ways, very rare, very culturally significant material. In his words, he said that the eel represents survival spirit and tradition flowing through generations. And I saw it as a power move of taking things back, which is a very central theme to this Met Gala, right? Of people with African heritage, African roots, saying that our heritage and our beauty was stolen from us in a lot of ways, but we've taken it back and we've created something even bigger and more beautiful from it. He also mentioned that his grandfather was very into fashion, such a dandy in him. I mean, just the color and the tailoring was very sharp. The cape was everything to me, but that's what we should be paying attention to. Like Kim, great. Anne Hathaway, cool. She's pretty. But we're talking about symbolism. We're talking about rich history. We're talking about conscious, right? Burna Boy wasn't wearing garments. He was wearing a story, and he brought a story to life via garments. And as you can see by the smile on my face, I was very impressed. I was so happy. This was a real highlight for me of the night. I adored his outfit. And let's talk about Kerry Washington. So she wore custom Jonathan Simkai. The look has a tailored white jacket with an open back, which I love, paired with sheer white skirt, structured hat. So the tailored jacket paying an homage to the traditional dandyism, super fine tailoring. The skirt with the modern twist, giving her more of that androgynous touch where it's masculine on top, feminine on the bottom. And then again, structured hat, extra layer of history. I think the fabric choice was great. And it was a very coordinated ensemble. I can see how people would say it was a little muted, a little boring. I think that she was great for the theme, great for her. What she wore spoke to her personally. It made sense for her. I liked it. Now, Chapel Roan. I know Chapel Roan got a little bit of backlash, but there's so much history to this. First of all, this was all sourced from eBay, even though the entire Met Gala was low-key like an eBay ad for some reason. And the costume designer of Wicked sourced it for her. So this was all secondhand off of eBay. The guy that did Wicked found it for her. So it was a glittery pink patchwork two-piece suit with flared sleeves, some really wide lapels, and a really dramatic bell bottom. Underneath, she was wearing a pink Oxford shirt that she left unbuttoned. Allegedly, Pat McGrath worked on her makeup look for weeks, but then when she was leaving the hotel, she wore a hot pink cape with magenta tinsel. That didn't make it, but that was a fun reveal because, you know, people camp out at the hotel trying to see what people are wearing before they make it onto the carpet. And it was really cool. The very, very specific 1970 glam rock. I know people go straight to David Bowie, but I was getting a little Rick James out of it. I know she directly named Sylvester, and it was that nod to quoting Lizzo, black people made rock and roll, and that there's so much black heritage and black roots and so many facets of culture, of media, of the arts, and her being in the music industry, having her own flair and take on things. So it was more contemporary flair. It was more of an homage, showcasing her style, how she does things. I can see how people didn't like it because it was a little Chapel. It was a little branded in a way. Seemed a little coordinated, if you get what I mean. But she was one of the only people to touch on that very specific, very overlooked period of black culture being rock and roll. And I just think the styling choices, the materials, the fact that it was all sourced secondhand, absolutely adore. Very on brand for her, very conscious, very, very Chapel. Keita Brunson wore a custom Sergio Hudson ensemble, a pinstripe corset top, patched with matching skirt, and a dramatic white coat. She had a red rose corsage, which I adored. She wore a short bob. It was a a lot of nods to Josephine Baker throughout the night. She was one of the first. So further emphasizing the theme and Baker's influence over Black fashion, Black culture, and just throughout the event, the entire night, everyone mentioned Josephine Baker. I love the pinstripe corset top. It was very modern interpretation of the classic dandy aesthetic. It was sharp, precise tailoring with individuality, self-expression. She can body a red carpet. The white coat was formal and really reinforcing that traditional structure of dandyism in fashion. But that red rose corsage, okay, it was a very romantic and dramatic embellishment that was often seen in historical fashion, particularly in the Victorian era, with symbolic accessories like flowers used to convey emotion, status, giving it to one's partner, reading them a sonnet. I love those little touches. I loved how it all came together. We're going to see throughout the night that there was a lot of androgyny because, of course, with tailoring, with women wearing suiting. Back in the day, you know, it was illegal for women to wear a suit. So I think she did it beautifully. It worked perfectly, and she brought a lot of life to her garment. And Dapper Dan, so he wore a zoot suit made by himself, a garment once criminalized, once penalized, looked down upon, and it was shimmering, it was sequin covered. He did wear Cartier jewelry, which I'll give a nod to. I do thank Cartier for giving Dapper Dan some flowers. But again, it's really hard seeing someone like Dapper Dan there, because one of my biggest problems with this Met Gala was the pandering, was how fake it felt. I don't want to be the person that says I have a lot of Black friends, but from Black friends, from Black followers of mine, I think everyone was in a lot of agreement that's Black, saying this was very performative. We want to see action inclusion. We want to see more people there. You know, this was the most representation we've ever seen on the red carpet. Half these people we don't know. Why is that? Because the industry excludes them. Because the industry has found ways to make sure that Black people, and of course other indigenous people of color, are often excluded from fashion and high fashion spaces. And Dapper Dan had the living light suit out of him. He was criminalized. He was looked down as, you know, quote unquote ghetto garbage, hood rat. It wasn't cool to engage in logomania when Dapper Dan did it back in the 80s, but now that Billie Eilish does it, a little white girl, yeah, it's so cool. So like, I understand he has to be there in a way because like he pioneered a lot of this. He broke down so many walls. He walked so everyone else could run. Honestly, he crawled so everyone else could walk. From an art perspective, from a culture perspective, I mourn the loss we had by the industry destroying Dapper Dan. I'm happy that he has his flowers now. I'm happy that he has some form of recognition, that they've given him a bone. But imagine a world where there's a Dapper Dan brand that's as big as Gucci, as big as Louis Vuitton. Imagine a world, you know, Fendi picked him up and said, hey, want to design a menswear collection for us? It's hard being an observer and a lover of fashion and the arts and culture and heritage when we see what we've lost before our very eyes. I'm so glad he was there. I'm so glad he showed us he still has it in him. I would never doubt that from him. But from my perspective, it's incredibly sad to see him there when the industry destroyed him. On a lighter note, Tom Ford, nothing notable here. I just wanted to point out that he's wearing his own tux, which he doesn't normally do. And he's just sexy. Next, we had Nicole Kidman. Now, Nicole is a masterclass in Balenciaga. As we know, she's a Balenciaga girl. She got one hell of a contract. So this was a reinterpretation of a 1952 Cristobal Balenciaga design. An hourglass silhouette. It was more layered. There was some inspiration happening from Eartha Kitt, from Harlem's Cotton Club era. And I know that people didn't like the hem and that the hem was so short, but what I say to that is that shorter hem is a little nod to like the Harlem Renaissance. Black women at the time did wear shorter, like mid-length headlines that were a little awkward, but those were inserted so that women could go from work to play and still enjoy nightlife and have a sense of movement and fluidity in whatever they were wearing. So I thought it was a really fun interpretation. She did have a Black stylist being Jason Bolden. I know she didn't speak that great about the garment. Did she necessarily bring it to life? But I love what it was doing. I love what it was saying. Of course, bare minimum for a white woman, at least. Even though she's working with a predominantly white brand, she did have a Black stylist. Nod to that at the very least. I know we can say it's a stretch, like can we really extend this garment from the European ateliers to the Harlem ballrooms? I say maybe, you never know. So there's that line of formality and self-expression, movement, fluidity, the dandy bow tie giving just half a percentage of gender play. I liked it. It was a nice garment. And we have Brian Tyree Henry in custom orange culture Nigeria. He wore a metallic brocade cape, very 18th century aristocrat. Back in the day, men's formal capes or mantles that were worn over court dresses in this era. The gold pattern, the ornate textile, think Versailles, the silk weaving. And back in the day, capes like this were literal status symbols, right? Showcasing wealth and richness through the fabric, and that's a heavy fabric too, so very expensive fabric. The white ruffled cuffs, I mean, just a little too ruffled, but they're very dramatic. So they were a decorative ruffled or lace neck piece or cuff, worn by men in the 17th and 18th century. Initially had these cuffs cuffs or collars because they were so expensive. Lace was expensive. That deep color, kind of like cardinal power, shout out to Conclave. And that color was historically reserved for noblemen, for clergy, for very high-ranking officials. And the gold chain necklace, I mean, when I saw gold chains, like for reference, like my parents are from Brooklyn, we can really talk about African dysphoria and heritage and everything I started out with. Just think of like 80s Brooklyn, the hip hop scene, the rap scene, you know, history lesson for some Americans that missed out. Gold chains were like a huge part of the Black community for a very long time in the 80s and 90s. So I love that broader discussion of, is this historical? Is this modern? And then just tying it all together. So the look was very, of course, dandy, a lot of tailored flamboyance, right? A really good exploration of dandyism, of the gender performance, of historical silhouettes, historical textures, colors. And Black dandy tradition historically reclaims that European aristocrat code to assort the power, identity, beauty, taking back things that were stolen. Entire thing, the cape and the cuffs, adore. I think he did phenomenal. And next we have Lo Wen. I might be butchering her name. I'm so sorry, queen. First, she's wearing a tailored silhouette. This is a Burberry look, very precise in the tailoring. I love the rich fabric usage. It's like a velvet jacquard situation. Very screaming the opulence associated with dandyism, with having access to those really expensive fine fabrics. So it was a modern design. It was very on theme, but what I like to add to it is Lu's Chinese heritage, right? So just the color, the velvet, the jacquard situation, it was very much screaming China, right? And I think this was the best way for other minorities to indulge and play without being 100% on theme and wearing freaking zoot suits, right? Because you can very clearly tell the dandyism inspiration, how tight that waist was, how flared out those pants were, and just the fabric choice. It's really simple decisions and choices like that that really elevate looks in situations like this, right? It's screaming Black dandyism, it's screaming her Chinese heritage and culture, and I adored it. I think Daniel Lee did fantabulous with this. And of course we had Demi Moore in Tom Brown. Now she wore a necktie, which was one gimmick. I can't remember the exact Met Gala. Was it camp? When Violet Chachki wore a glove, and then when she was doing interviews and they're like, tell us about your dress, and she's like, well, it fits like a glove. I mean, Demi was just walking around all night like, I'm a tie. Bodice formed the tie knot, and she had a headpiece in the form of the collar of the tie. It was Tom Brown, 1.4 million beads, had 7,600 hours of work. And I think this was a nod to history, actually. Back in the 18th century Europe, aristocrats, the higher ups, they played a lot with headwear. You see that a lot in Black culture, you know, around Easter time, especially in Southern culture, certain parts of Africa still, where Black and African people and communities play a lot with headwear, and they turn it into competitions. Also nod to Brooklyn back in the day. I thought the entire ensemble was very well coordinated. I thought it was so cool. She had such a great time. I think she had the most out there, campy look of the night. I love the nod to headwear in a different way. Headwear that's, you know, very playful, very abstract, very modern, but also has a historical significance. Is the actual garment, you know, on theme? Maybe not, but I see where she was going. She was heavily involved with it. I like it. Doja Cat wore Marc Jacobs, and we're seeing structured shoulders, a tailored silhouette, the animal print. So the animal print bodice adding a layer of boldness to it. Very unique to her, having that cat-like reflex, because we know Doja Cat, she loves paying homage to kitties on the carpet, right? The platform heels are a staple of the house of Marc Jacobs, but he took it even higher for her. 80s rock. I immediately got like Salt and Peppa, Grace Jones. We Like the Cars that go boom. And I think this was a very, very formal way of hip hop. Of course, Black dandyism, using style to resist oppression. So if you really like minus the gaudiness, the extremeness of it, it is a really plain outfit, but really exaggerating those lines, those huge shoulders, the excess animal print. I think Doja did a great job of emphasizing menswear and playing with gender. It screamed Black culture, Black significance, Black excellence, and just the way she spoke about it all night. She did a great Get Ready With Me with Vogue. She was so involved with this garment, brought it to life, 10 out of 10. I think she and Mark did phenomenal on this. And my girl Sha'Carri Richardson, she's wearing Valentino, just a delicate lavender lace, yellow drape fabric, and it really echoed the Regency era, classical era. Lace was very light, ethereal, soft flowing, and it was a really good callback to ancient Greek and Roman draping techniques, to sculpt fabric without actually having to necessarily tailor it or sew it together. Just that form of tailoring in a way, you know, how did people tailor before tailoring? I think that was a really smart nod back to history. The yellow and the lavender, I know it was a choice, but the contract was very bold and modern twist on the soft pastels that dandies used to use. And Black dandyism, pastels were very heavily used in a way to stand out and make personal statements against the backdrop of those colonial fashion norms. A draped belt detail was mirroring how fashion was a tool of liberation, the power to choose what she wears to her body, speaking to the the feminine body. You know, we see the female body being trendy, right? You know, guilty of this like the Kardashians, you know, every other year they have a brand new body that they buy. But the fact that the dress was flowing, that the dress was tailored, but it wasn't, that it can move with her, that it can evolve with her. And I think that was a great way of tying it all together, that you can still have the soft feminine shape, but also those strong lines. It was a really cool bend of the gender expectations of the theme and class structure, cultural expectations. Thought it was gorgeous. And again, just the choice to tailor it without tailoring it. Chef's kiss. Great job, Valentino. And next we have Hunter Schafer, and she's a double-breasted coat, and it had military and formal elements. So the sharp angular shoulders, the structured shape, very heavy on the menswear, and it was a little bit androgynous in the way that it had that elevated collar and the gloves, right? So the sense of fluidity and gender expression, which was very key to understanding Black dandy tradition. The black cape added drama, historical context, so effortless display of wealth. Cape was also symbolic of the dramatic aspects to dandyism. The beret, of course, modern chic, very reminiscent of the Black Panther movement, and of course other revolutionary and counterculture movements throughout the world, all meshing into one, and also being military inspired. I got a very strong sense of Black Panther from this. It had those really strong and apparent Black dandyism touches, but I love the modern civil rights movement touch to it. I love this one, Gabby Thomas and Priya Aluwalia. This was an immediate standout for me. I absolutely adored it. It was a rich satin fabric, very sleek, very form-fitting, modern interpretation of tailoring on the female body, and it had that Black dandyism and also Baroque mesh to it. It was beaded, draped along the shoulders and down the back, so lots of visual intrigue, a nice sculptural element, and of course the fabric itself, the beading were obvious, not the dandyism. There were also dangling beads, which aided in that theatrical element. The backless design, but with a train, really nice ode to freedom, power, and being liberated in your own self-expression, you know, having that excess fabric that could cover you, but making the choice not to be covered. And I did love how theatrical it is. You know, when we talk about the topic of misogynoir and Black women engaging in luxury and opulence being seen as showing off as too much, I love the fact that she was feeling herself. I love how rich and theatrical the garment was on her. Black women are expected to be so pious and calm, and I love that she served it to us on a platter. Now, Jodie Turner-Smith, she wore Burberry, deep red tailored leather coat, dramatic collar, and her outfit was a nod to Salika Levzevsky, a Black female equestrian of yesteryear. Of course, being an equestrian at the time, she played a lot with gender in her own. You had the tall top hat, fitted waist, flared skirt with an hourglass shape to it, and also referencing the historical corsetry of what women wore at the time. You know, the red leather being passion, power, luxurious material, a touch of military, a touch of equestrian, and you can see the entire look as a nod to Black liberation, as the lack of respect, as especially a magnifying glass being looked at towards Black women. So she gave us a lot to look at and to put a magnifying glass on. Very great elements of the dandy. I love the historical significance. I love that, again, that especially equestrianism, seen as such a rich white pastime, yet there were prominent Black figures that made their mark in the space. Another form of acknowledging Black excellence. Chef kiss. Great job, Daniel Lee and the Jodie Turner-Smith. Now, Daniel Lee himself, first of all, he's fine. Second of all, he walked with Jodie Turner-Smith. He wore a velvet suit, rich textured fabric, of course, it's Burberry, made by himself. Floral pattern that he wore really evoked the opulence of Victorian tailoring, specifically the ornate fabric they used at the time. So very modern reimagining of 9th century menswear, far more sleeker, far more sexy. So the blazer and the trousers being as structured and fitted as they are, being the nod to dandyism. The velvet fabric and the pattern being a nod to luxury, which is all central to Black dandyism. And the fact that they walked together was a really nice touch of ambiguous masculinity, but also avant-garde femininity. And both those roles played within Black dandyism on their own, but the fact they separated them just a bit and gave you their own special moment, but still had elements of the opposite in each other and themselves. I think it was great. Daniel Lee, if you ever need a third, call me. And Sabrina Carpenter, she wore Louis Vuitton designed by Pharrell. I know people didn't like it, didn't love it. There was something really weird about Pharrell saying she couldn't wear pants. So of course, menswear tailoring, double-breasted shark-cut blazer, I'm gonna call it a slit cape she wore, was very on brand for her. She did like what she was wearing. It did feel a little adult, you get what I'm saying? The really high heel platform shoes, which is her brand, not sure if it was great for this exact occasion. She's also really short, so that's also partially why she wears such huge heels. It was a really fun reinterpretation of menswear while also being performative, being sexy. Her brand really is youth, so also having that. What I'll say about her look is it was very branded for her. I can see how you can say objectively it was bad. I mean, the fabric was a decent choice, a little bland. You know, you saw a lot of people wearing similar color, similar textures, and it looked a lot better on them. On her, it wasn't hitting the same. But I think it was more so a nod to timeless elegance while also bringing in modern era appeal. I don't hate it. I don't love it. Indifferent. It was on theme to a degree, especially that collar. I will say that collar was a really nice touch. So merging of the gender codes. Then we had Tory Burch as a slave owner. I don't know what the hell she's wearing. Next, I want to touch on Lupita Nyong'o. She wore a mint blue suit. I was watching live coverage and she was the one that I was gagged for. I jaw dropped. I wouldn't have expected anything less from her. I think she, first of all, she just has the most radiant glowing skin tone, and pastels and light colors always look so dramatic and incredible on her. So she wore a mint blue suit, very masculine, feminine elements, had the double-breasted jacket, structured shoulder. She wore a very high-waisted trouser. So combination of masculine on top, feminine on the bottom. She had the huge cape and hat, really good nod to elegance and rebellion. And just again, that flowing cape, lots of royalty, lots of grandeur, lots of performance and theater. The hat was a nice androgynous element, so giving structured formality while also having the flowing cape. The choice of minimalist jewelry, I will talk about jewelry with her because she wanted you to focus on the suit. Such a big, elegant thing, it takes some restraint to not wear jewels. But that restraint really spoke to the confidence that Black Dandies had, where the clothing spoke for themselves, and the clothing and the story behind it and the person wearing it told the story rather than accessories building an ensemble. And I love that she and her stylist didn't overshadow the look by adding in other elements. I thought it was beautiful, jaw dropped. And then saying all of this, and to my surprise, finding out a few moments later that was made by Chanel. This was just incredible. It's sad that Chanel made it for her. It could have been any other brand, honestly. And again, beyond that, I just feel like there's so many other designers. We don't need to give more name recognition to the Yahtzee. So with that being said, and her being one of my favorite looks of the night, because it's sadly Chanel. That's it for part one. I have so much more to share with all of you. There were so many looks. I can only do so much at once with my brain. So comment if you liked it, what else you want to see, because I am in the midst of filming part two, so I will be glad to add in your recommendations. I hope you enjoy the video. I will post the next one as soon as I can. But look at the world with open eyes, not just is this pretty or not. There's so much more to it. The next video is going to be a little bit more hefty, so can't wait to see. Do your research before then.